You are listening to a special edition of the IU Report with Grant Shouse and Mike Hutsell. Their preview of the Big Ten championship game between the second-ranked Indiana Hoosiers and number one defending national champion Ohio State in Indianapolis. Of course, Grant and Mike will be back after the game with their reaction to what happens. Only on the Central Indiana Sports Report. Welcome back, college football fans, to the Central Indiana Sports Report for a special edition of the IU Report, the Big Ten football championship game. Number one, Ohio State. Number two, IU. And, guys, we're going to make our predictions at the end. And, spoiler, I'm going to take Ohio State, but I just think it's amazing. As someone who is not an IU fan, the job that Cignetti's done, win or lose here, and the amazing thing is I would not be shocked at all if it turns out that IU wins this game and is the best team in the country. And Grant, that's just 2 years ago, IU lost the Old Oaken Bucket to Purdue, and here they are.
Yeah, they haven't looked back since then. Again, it's incredible how far this program's come, man. I remember sitting there in the pissing down rain against Ohio State one year at IU in 2021. There were a lot of people at that game. There's a lot of Ohio State people at a night game. And to think about now, 4 or 5 years later, Indiana is undefeated at the same time as Ohio State, playing in the biggest game in program history, arguably the biggest game in the 21st century for the Big Ten. They have a chance to be the number one seed in the college football playoff. Just to me is mind-boggling. As a lifelong fan like me for 21 years, Mike, who's been a fan for, God, I don't know.
More than 21.
Yeah, more than 21. It sometimes when you sit back, you take it all in, you realize what's going on. I think it can get emotional for some people. It would mean the world to these people here in Indiana if they win the game. I don't know if they're going to win. I really don't. I don't know what to expect from this game. I could tell you what I think could happen, but I don't really know what to expect. You're kind of going in like it's Groundhog Day. Are we going to get the Indiana that we got last year against Ohio State? I don't necessarily think so. Are we going to get the Indiana we got against Oregon? I think we could, but then again, I don't know. There's a lot of research I put into this, guys. I spent all Sunday and Monday basically researching this matchup, and I like Indiana on paper here, like a lot. And you don't play the game on paper. You play a game on the field. But on paper, this year, when we matched it all up, Indiana's looked great against all their opponents, including Oregon. They won the game. Against Penn State, they won the game. Iowa, they won the game. You're feeling a little good from that perspective. But then again, Ohio State has guys on their team, Mike, that are literally NFL players that are still in college, which is just unbelievable. This team is so talented. They're going to play on Saturday.
When you got a team that arguably their defense is going to have 2 of the first 6 picks in the NFL draft with Arvell Reese and Caleb Downs, and that's just those 2 guys. It's not like the rest of the guys. There's some serious talent downgrade, but the thing of all the teams that Indiana could, if there's a final hill that you have to scale to establish what you and bring legitimacy to your program over what's happened over the last 2 years, this is the final boss. This is the team that has used Indiana as a footstool for the better part of 3 decades. And this is the team with the most arrogant fan base in college football. They're going to roll in their 2012 Buick LeSabre, some guy who goes by Big Nut 469 on the Ohio State message board with his face painted. And they're going to come in thinking, you say the game's not played on paper. They think it's going to be played on history books. This isn't the Indiana team they played last year, at least in my very, very unhumble opinion. This is not the Indiana team that they played last year. So if there's a moment to be had for Indiana football to just establish itself where it wants to establish itself, this is the opponent that it has to be against. They could have played Oregon. They could have played Michigan. It needed to be who it is. We get to measure ourselves against the best team in the country. It's 1 versus 2. Let's just kick it off and see what happens.
And I don't necessarily think of Indiana as an underdog in this situation. Now, Mike, let's be honest. Going back to that game last year, not to dwell on it, but at that point, did you really feel like Indiana was going to go there to Columbus and win that game? Just be honest.
The fan in me, yes, I thought they were going to. The realistic part of me was like, this team's about to get humbled a little bit. I think the spread pretty much going into that one told you what was going to happen. I think it was double. It was well into double figures. I don't remember what it ended up being. And you've seen an opposite story this year. The number opened at 5.5, quickly moved to 4.5, and now you're at 4. So the money right now is coming in on Indiana, and there's an awful lot of sharp bettors that will tell you to move the line 1.5 like that is saying something. So you're going to break down a lot of stats. You're going to break down a lot of analytics. Everything I've seen this week shows that this game is 49.8 Indiana, 50.2 Ohio State, or Indiana 51, Ohio State 49%. Just based on whatever metric you're looking at, it looks just so evenly matched on paper. Again, like you said, it's not played on paper, but this is the best team I think Ohio State has faced this year. Obviously, the best team Indiana has faced this year, so let's do it.
I don't have that feeling I had last year going into Columbus. Again, like you said, the fan in you says yes, but in the back of your mind, you're like, we'll see, right? We'll see how they compete. I don't feel that way this year. I really think Indiana has a shot to win this game. Ohio State's defense is insane. I wrote down here all of the times or all of the ways Indiana allowed their opponents to score. Okay, so listen closely. Old Dominion, 2 long runs by the quarterback in busted coverage. All right, first play of the season. Kennesaw State scored 3 field goals, lost 56-9. Indiana State didn't score. They lost 73-0. Illinois scored 1 field goal and scored a touchdown on busted coverage from the IU defense, which is, we've seen that we've seen that multiple times here this year. Indiana had Iowa come down and score 1 time on them. The rest were field goals. Indiana won 20-15. Oregon scored 1 offensive touchdown on them on a busted coverage again and a pick 6. Then they also hit field goals. Michigan State put together a long drive and made them pay. They scored, hit a couple field goals. UCLA lost 56-6. Indiana won 56-6. UCLA scored 2 field goals. Maryland 1 field goal after giving them the ball in deep in plus territory. And then they scored a long touchdown on a 55-yard check down pass. Penn State, credit to Penn State. They played well. They played better than anyone has against Indiana this year. Indiana still won 27-24. Indiana beat Wisconsin 31-7. Wisconsin scored 1 touchdown on a busted coverage pass play that everybody thought was going to be a run. That's the one that I had to check into the Bloomington Hospital there, Mike, because I was crashing out.
Had a stroke.
In Section 1. And then Indiana beat Purdue 56-3 after Purdue scored 1 field goal. So
what a field goal it was. Barry Odom telling his grandkids about that field goal, baby.
So that's how Indiana has allowed their teams to score. As for Ohio State, you thought Indiana's was impressive where they really haven't let teams come down and score on them. The only times they scored is on busted coverage. Well, listen to Ohio State. Ohio State let Texas score on a 32-yard touchdown pass when the game was essentially over. It was 14-0 late. And Ohio State still ended up winning 14-7 over Texas. They shut out Grambling State 70-0. They beat Ohio 37-9. Ohio scored a field goal. Ohio State gave up a busted coverage touchdown, a 67-yard touchdown pass that made it 13-9. Ohio State only up by 4 early in the third quarter. Washington scored 2 field goals. Minnesota 1 field goal. Illinois 1 field goal, and a 1-yard touchdown run. They had a long drive that made Ohio State pay. They went down and scored on them. They shut out Wisconsin. Wisconsin did not score. Penn State scored 2 touchdowns from inside their own 5-yard line after long drives. Purdue 1 field goal and a late touchdown. UCLA 1 touchdown and a late field goal. Rutgers 3 field goals. Michigan 3 field goals. Ohio State has not allowed an opponent to score a touchdown on them since November the 15th. But neither is Indiana. Both teams' defenses are really good. I would give the edge defensively just by a hair, maybe to Ohio State. Ohio State's just been a little more consistent defensively, where we've seen Indiana kind of get confused in coverages and let those long plays go. But I've also seen Indiana's defense be arguably just as good as Ohio State's, if not better, and arguably the best defense in the country.
How many times this year have we done this podcast, done a post-game reaction, done a preview, and we've said, man, Indiana's got a really good such and such. And then we said, but Ohio State's is probably a little bit better. Oh, man, Indiana's got a really good defense. They got a great coordinator. They probably have the best in the conference. Well, Ohio State's really good. Indiana's got 2 really, really good receivers. Man, they might have the best receivers in the Big Ten. And Ohio State's got Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Man, Mendoza, he might win the Heisman this year. Oh, yeah, the Saiyan kid's right there on his heels. It just seems... It's such a fun game to break down because it's no question who the best 2 teams in the conference are, and it's these 2. And the most disheartening thing for me is right now is I don't know where Indiana has an advantage. And I'll ask you, do you see any particular thing that Indiana does better than Ohio State?
It's a good question, and I think Indiana's better on special teams. I'm being serious. I think Indiana's better on special teams. They've made special teams play. I think Indiana is better overall, maybe opening football games. I think Indiana's better closing games. Because here's the thing is, Cignetti even said this, Ohio State hasn't been challenged, other than arguably the Texas game, where they haven't had to have a win by the hair on their chinny chin. Like where Indiana's had these gut check games like Penn State, like Iowa, like Oregon. Indiana is experienced in these late game situations. We don't know what Ohio State can do late in a game. Indiana wins close games. And if Indiana is in the game and it's a close game in the fourth quarter, I think they'll win. I truly do. I think they'll win the game if it's close in the fourth quarter. This staff under Curt Cignetti is 26-16 in one-score games, even going all the way back to the IUP days. They're 26-16. Ryan Day and Ohio State a little less consistent there, where they are 9-6 in close games, in one-score games. And credit to them this year where they've won their only one-score game over Texas. Last year in 2024, they were 2-2 in one-score games. They lost at Oregon. They lost to Michigan in a one-score game. They beat Penn State. They beat Nebraska in a one-score game. People want to talk about the head-to-head matchups here and who Indiana has blown out compared to Ohio State, where Indiana blew out Purdue 56-3. Ohio State only won 34-10. My question for you is, Mike, do you think that's a fair kind of comparison, or I guess a fair way to compare these teams on where they stand against each other because of what they've done against common opponents?
It's really the only metric you have is their on-field against teams that they played each other. Ohio State went to Illinois and won pretty convincingly, whereas we all know what Indiana did to Illinois at home. Ohio State had a pretty easy win against UCLA. So did Indiana. Purdue, the world stood still at 3-0, but Purdue got that early field goal that they seemed to really, really thrive on. But Ohio State obviously put it away. Ohio State's best win in conference probably it's either at Illinois, at Michigan. Well, obviously at Michigan ends up being their best. But going to the Michigan game, their best win in conference was either at Illinois or at Washington. Whereas Indiana's, you had at Oregon, obviously, and then at Iowa.
At Penn State.
At Penn State, but let's face it, this is a 6-6 Penn State team that can't seem to find a head coach. Ohio State struggled a little bit with Penn State in the first half of their game. Penn State moved the ball in the first half, where it was kind of the opposite for Indiana. They kind of dominated the first half of that game, but really struggled in the second half. So comparing opponents is difficult because both teams have dominated the conference teams they face so much, where the only struggle Indiana had was at Penn State, and Ohio State's biggest quote-unquote struggle is at Michigan, and I don't even really call that a struggle. It's your only level of comparison, but I think it only puts an exclamation mark on the fact that these are two really, really evenly matched teams.
And I think that Indiana has the best win in college football this year, where they went on the road and won at Oregon. We even saw what Ohio State last year. I know you don't want to live in the past, but just kind of going off of last year, Ohio State lost at Oregon, and Indiana won kind of convincingly at Autzen Stadium. So I think you can kind of build on that. But when you talk about stats and you stack them up against each other and what Indiana does and what Ohio State does, Indiana leads all but 7 statistical categories against the Buckeyes, Mike. They scored more points. They scored more points per game. They've had more first downs. They've had more rushing first downs. They've rushed for more yards. They've averaged more yards a carry. They average more yards a game on the ground. Passing-wise, Ohio State just does have a little bit more of the advantage. As a team, Indiana completes 71% of their passes, whereas Ohio State only completes 59% of their passes. On third down, Indiana converts 57% of their third downs. Ohio State only converts 56% of their first downs. In the first quarter of games this year, Indiana is outscoring opponents 122-33. Ohio State's outscoring opponents 85-12. So the key is, I think, of course, you're going to have to set the table early in the first quarter. I think if Indiana can put a couple scores, couple touchdowns up on the board in the first quarter, if they can get through that defense and try and break Ohio State down, again, I like their chances early. You mentioned the defense and just how great both defenses are. Indiana, again, statistic-wise, has a better defense, significantly more tackles for loss than Ohio State.
Indiana, we learned today Grant, tackles for loss don't matter because the best player in the conference for tackles for loss was only an honorable mention All Big Ten player in Stephen Daly.
And I was literally about to say that. Hey, I could be a good thing. I think your Stephen Daly in Indiana, that's bulletin board, man. You use that on the bulletin board. Indiana has sacked their opponents more than Ohio State. They have more interceptions. They have more pass breakups. They have more pressures on the quarterback. They have more individual tackles. Again, Stephen Daly, the conference's tackle leader, 18 tackles for loss this year that have gone for 71 yards lost. Ohio State's leading tackler is actually an Indianapolis kid, Caden Curry from Center Grove High School, 13 and a half tackles for loss that have gone for 70 yards. Again, Indiana really has fared well in most of these categories, and some of them that Ohio State has their leg up in, like time of possession. Ohio State's averaging only 14 seconds more than Indiana on time of possession per game. And they have more passing first downs, 154 passing first downs to Indiana's 132. The thing is, Ohio State's defense this year has only allowed 66 passing first downs from their opponents. Indiana's defense has allowed 91 passing first downs this year. People can say what they want. Ohio State's played a way easier schedule this year than Indiana has. And that's just a fact. You are not a serious person if you sit here and say, yeah, Ohio State's played better teams. Indiana hasn't played anybody. That is just bullshit.
Well, their conference schedules, I don't think really you can compare the two. Ohio State gets a lot off their traction off that season opener where they shut down your boy Arch and the Mannings. But I think you're right. Indiana has probably played overall a better schedule, but Indiana hasn't had a test other than the Penn State game. So, and Ohio State really hasn't had a test since the Penn State game. Sorry.
Okay.
Should have clarified. Ohio State really hasn't had a test all season because, like you said, even the Texas game was 14-0 with 3 minutes to go, and Texas scores to put a little bit of pressure on. But they fell behind a little bit early in the Michigan game. It was 6-0, but then they just cruised from there. So maybe the reason they haven't been tested is they're that much better than everybody they've played.
And that is very scary, and that is one of the things you do have to consider. And I guess the game will tell us. People want to harp on the non-conference schedule for Indiana. Their first two opponents in Old Dominion and Kennesaw State both finished 9-3 this year. Those aren't the teams you probably want your number 2 team in the country to be playing, but those teams are 9-3, and Indiana next year opens up with a team that could be in the college football playoff field in North Texas this year. So only time will tell. But Indiana overall has played a little bit of a better schedule, like 11-1 Oregon. I think they played probably the better teams on their schedule were in the first half of the year. 9-3 Old Dominion, 9-3 Kennesaw, 8-4 Illinois, 8-4 Iowa, 11-1 Oregon. And you have not played a team with a over 500 record since the Oregon game, but you've been challenged in a game like Penn State. Whereas you look at Ohio State and what they've done, it's the same story in the second half of the year as Indiana, except for Michigan, who's 9-3. Texas is 9-3. Grambling State went 7-5. Ohio went 8-4. Washington 8-4. Minnesota 7-5. Illinois 8-4. Wisconsin 4-8. Penn State 6-6. Purdue 2-10. UCLA 3-9. Rutgers 5-7. Michigan 9-3. Indiana. I know there's some consistency at the first half of that schedule for both teams. Second half of the year, they have not been challenged. Ohio State hasn't been challenged. I think Indiana's been challenged with Penn State, of course. But Ohio State really has not seen a challenge yet this year. And Indiana, I hope, can present problems. Maybe, I guess it is scary to think about that. Maybe Ohio State hasn't been challenged because they're just that damn good. I just feel like Ohio State hasn't, and hopefully I'm wrong and I don't eat my words come Saturday night, but Ohio State really has the roster and the capability, I think, to pound teams, just absolutely take them to the woodshed. And they haven't really done that like we've seen Indiana do it. Like we saw them do it against Illinois and UCLA and Maryland, where they pounded these teams. Ohio State, like they beat Minnesota 42-3. They beat Purdue 34-10, UCLA 48-10, Michigan 27-9. They just haven't really blown it open like Indiana has and just pounded some teams. I don't know who you give the leg up to in that department, but I think that is one of the things to consider if you're making a bet.
One thing that we haven't discussed yet, and it probably won't matter, but it would be nice if it did. The news broke today that Brian Hartline, the offensive coordinator for Ohio State, is headed to South Florida once the season concludes. I know Hartline was in discussions with Kentucky for that job. So if he's been interviewing for jobs this week, hey, maybe his mind hasn't 100% been focused on Indiana, and he is going to stay on as long as the season's going as the OC. Hartline is one of the top assistants in the country. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. He's turned Ohio State into wide receiver university. A huge get for South Florida, it seems like, as far as the coaching carousel. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's something that Ohio State wasn't prepared for. I'm looking for advantages wherever I can find them.
One of the things I don't like here is that Indiana gave Ohio State some bulletin board material today. Kurt Cignetti, for the second straight season, was named the Big Ten Coach of the Year. You don't know how Ohio State players will respond to that and say, oh, Ryan Day is also undefeated and could have won Big Ten Coach of the Year. And they're right. I'm not saying that Cignetti just stood above all of them. I think he did make more of an impact for his program than maybe Ryan Day did this year. That's hard to argue. They're literally both 1 and 2 in the country. That's what's been lingering on my mind a little bit, Mike, is how much of this Big Ten championship really matters. You obviously want to win the game, but both teams are in the playoff. They're going to be in the playoff as long as one of them doesn't get blown out. I don't think Indiana would blow this team out, but you don't want Indiana getting blown out by Ohio State. Now there's the question if you're going to be a top 4 team. You're both going to be in the playoff. You're basically playing this game to decide who's going to be the 1 seed. Is this, do you think, a meaningless game, maybe more for Ohio State than it is Indiana? Because all the pressure's on Ohio State to win. That's the thing. They're favored on all betting lines. The public, the college football people expect them to win. The pressure's on Ohio State. Indiana's got nothing to lose here.
Well, in the big scope of the 2025 college football season, no, I don't think this game matters. I can guarantee you, to an Indiana fan, this game means a hell of a lot more than it does to the Ohio State fan. The Ohio State fan's going to say, oh, if they lose, okay, well, we'll just be the 2 seed. Indiana fans, if they win this thing, they're going to want to have a parade all the way down back to Bloomington, because Indiana winning the Big Ten championship, going undefeated, and going to play in the Rose Bowl for the college football playoff, that doesn't happen. That's never been a part of any fans, even collective, wish list. We've how many times we've talked about we'd have been happy if Kurt Cignetti came in and went 8-4 in his first 2 seasons. So it means a hell of a lot more to Indiana fans than it does to Ohio State. I can guarantee you that. Now, whoever loses,
if Indiana wins the game, it still won't be the biggest win in program history, surpassing the 1967 Old Oak and Bucket game when Indiana beat Purdue to go to the Rose Bowl. This win still won't come anywhere near that game.
That's right.
I really hope that's sarcasm that I'm just not picking up on.
It is.
Okay,
It's hearkening back to an earlier joke, Mike.
I thought that's what he was going for, but you never know, because there are still going to be Indiana fans who will probably make that argument, regardless of if Indiana wins on Saturday or not. But if you want to talk about the 2025 college football playoff and the ramifications for this game, if Ohio State wins, they're obviously the number 1 seed. If Indiana wins, they're the number 1 seed. If Ohio State loses, I think they fall from 1 to 2. If Indiana loses and it's by more than 10 points and Georgia beats Bama to avenge their only loss on the season, I think it's going to be tough. I think Georgia is going to slide into the number 2 slot in that scenario. Then the question becomes, what if Texas Tech beats BYU again? Texas Tech's only loss this year is going to be a game where their starting quarterback didn't play against Arizona State. Does Texas Tech become the 3, Indiana the 4? I just don't see either one of these teams falling out of the top 4, because where Oregon sits, Indiana's not going to – we talked about it earlier this week. I can't see a scenario where they're going to put Oregon in front of Indiana.
I don't think so either, just because of the head-to-head matchup with Indiana and Oregon earlier in the year. Again, I'm hoping you just kind of solve all this by just winning the game. Beating Ohio State there in the Big Ten championship for the biggest win in program history. I'm all for it, man. I've been thinking about how crazy this would be for a long, long time. I'd love to see it get done for people like my grandpa, who's been a fan his whole life. and hasn't seen anything like this ever. People like my dad, who's never seen anything like this, where we're kind of spoiled. We're kind of living in the glory days of this football program right now. And the glory days aren't defined by like a 7-5 year or like an 8-4 or maybe like a sneaky 9-3 year. We're talking about an undefeated football team going to play the number one team in the country on a neutral field in your home state. I had someone tell me today, they're like, do you realize how many Ohio State people will be at that game? There's going to be more Ohio State people at that game than Indiana. And I go, do you not realize that the game's being played in Indianapolis? There's going to be people flooded to that game that are Indiana fans. It is going to be a home game. And you get Ohio State at home next year, which is a whole other thing. The opportunity is right here. You just have got to go grab it. Indiana, I think, can win the game on Saturday. Will they win the game? I've got no idea.
Grant, I know you got friends who say this is going to be an Ohio State home game, and they probably did buy a lot of tickets before the market absolutely went crazy for this game, which I don't think really happened until the Oregon game. These dumb motherfuckers are going to come driving in 3 miles in the fast lane, driving under the speed limit like every idiot from Ohio ever does.
That's right.
And we just got to send them home in a really, really shitty mood. They can go home. They can stop and get that shitty chili that Cincinnati serves. They can go watch some Drew Carey show reruns. Go watch the two worst franchises in NFL history. Go cry about the Columbus Crew, who I don't even think exist anymore. Maybe they do. I don't care.
And as you mentioned, the worst fans in college football.
The prison from Shawshank's in Ohio. I learned that weird fact when I was driving to the Pro Football Hall of Fame once.
Really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
All right, guys, let's make our predictions. Grant is going to wuss out, I think. Mike might too, but I'm going to say that I think this is going to be, as Grant mentioned, a defensive struggle. Points are going to be at a premium. Both teams, though, have really good offensive playmakers. It's going to come down to who makes those plays. I think it's pretty much a toss-up. I value it better than 2-1, but give me Ohio State.
It's tough to make a prediction. You don't want to predict your own team, but then again, you don't want to be wrong. It looks stupid. I'm not going to give you a score. I'll give you a spread. I'll take Ohio State by 40.
Oh, man. I don't know. I really, truly don't know. We've talked
I don't
for
either.
40. We've talked for 40 minutes now, and I don't have any sort of opinion one way or the other. Grant said one thing that kind of caught my attention is if Indiana's better on special teams this year than Ohio State. Remember last year's game was largely decided by two special teams blunders by Indiana. The snap that the punter didn't even seem like he tried to catch before halftime, and the punt return in the beginning of the third quarter that turned a 7-7 game into a 21-7 game. So if Indiana's truly better on special teams, maybe they keep it close and they win on a Radish's field goal late in the game. To me, I just think that the NFL talent is there for Ohio State. So I will stick with the Buckeyes. I don't know a score. I'm not going to go there. I think Ohio State wins. With the spread being at 4, that seems about right to me. So Ohio State ekes it out.
I think we all three agree Ohio State in a close one, and it could go either way. I think we all three agree with that.
I 100% agree with that.
Thanks, everyone. We will be back this weekend with more IU football and some IU basketball as well. They take on Louisville on Saturday afternoon. Grant and Mike will be back either on Saturday or Sunday. Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love Susie.